Well, good morning to you this morning, and thank you again this morning for being with us this morning. Um, if you don't care, one day this week, if you get the chance, just send us a Y in whatever. It don't matter. Uh, we're just looking at possibly, doing away with some of the stuff, that we're not utilizing in the church. And I know some of you may, use a devotion, and some of you may not, and I definitely understand that. So, if you are, just put, just do it this way: put the first initial of your name, just so we kind of know. Hey, we could put a name with it, and we can just see how many people are kind of watching it, how many's interested in us trying to keep it. We may try to change it up down the road a little bit, let some other people start doing it, something along that line. Whatever you do, just kind of let us know. It's just going to help us to slowly start becoming more, um, more disciplined in our spending. That, you know, the money that we do have is the Lord's money, and we definitely want to be more diligent with that. And we definitely want to do better with it. We don't want to stop things that we feel like the people, in the church are benefiting from. But at the same time, if we're not utilizing it, then we don't want to keep spending the money for it, okay? So I thank you for that this morning. Last week we were talking about, destroying the works and the work of Satan, and one of the things that I realized this week, and I'll get into it maybe tomorrow a little more with you, in the book of Revelation, where the Bible says, and that old devil, the Satan, he was cast out of heaven, and there was rejoicing, the accuser of the brother. One of the things that, this morning as we were talking in Sunday school and in church this morning, when we start murmuring, and a lot of times the murmuring is not things just, against ourselves and against other people. And so if we're not careful, we'll allow one another to get by with that. We allow one another to get by with foolishness. And those are things that, I think that we got to really slowly, get more disciplined with, uh, as a church and as believers. And the things that it starts with, I get, to me is, what are we speaking? Not just about others, but, a lot of times we pay attention to when we're talking about other people, but when we're speaking about ourselves, it's like nobody really pays attention to it. But as Mag this morning brought up this morning, that she was thankful that the Lord, showed her one time when her daughter came into the house and called herself dumb, and how she looked at her and said no, and she said, and she could just feel the Lord, letting her know that it hurt him to hear his children speak of themselves concerning that. And, and the Bible tells us, so, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men. And so one of the things that we as believers got to start trying to do is help one another with that. So in Acts 8, we was there this morning, but over in verse number, I think it's like 18, I want to say, 21, and he tells him, he said, thou hast neither part or lot in this matter, for thy heart was not right with you. The one thing that I've seen with that also is that, we didn't touch on it this morning. I kind of, stopped a little early, I guess, but Peter was quick to correct this. Like Peter didn't walk away and say, man, I don't know why he does that. I don't know why he thinks that. He shouldn't think that, he can just buy everything. He shouldn't think that, because he's got money, he can do this. Peter corrected it right there. And I think that that's a thing that, we as Christians, we got to be able to do. We got to try to help correct one another. When you've said something for so long, it becomes so hard to even know that you're saying it. I've been around people that I know that just didn't catch some of the things that they were saying. And it takes somebody to come along, and that's what I talk about when I talk about accountability. Accountability is not always, you're wrong about this, but accountability is helping people to do better. My aunts, man, when I said things, like, man, I just not spiritual, man, they would correct me. When I said things like, I don't know much, they would correct me. When I said things like, man, I'm just not anointed, oh, God, they would correct me. They would never let me walk and say things, but they would always remind me of what the Word said, and that helped me, because after a while, them doing that, it started breaking it in me, my aunt was the world's worst on me. She's like, Elmer, you're always cutting yourself too thin. You need to start writing stuff down. You need to start a planner. You're always talking about it. You're going to do everything. And then, you're letting this person slip, and you're letting that. And yeah, you're going to them and you're giving them excuses. But honey, she goes, when you give somebody a word, there's no excuse, And so she kept on me about that it really made me become mindful of when I said yes and when I said no. And it took a lot, but she kept on me. She never gave up, because she always wanted me to do better. And because she loved me, and not just because she loved me, but she loved the Spirit of God that was in me. I hear people all the time say, but I love the Lord, I love the Lord. How can we love the Lord and not love the Spirit of God that dwells in people enough to correct it when they're violating it? And that's the thing that, I think that we over the years has slowly drifted from. We don't see that, that's the Spirit of God in whom you say you love that dwells in that person. And the one thing that you should do is love the Spirit of God enough that you correct them, that it doesn't grieve Him. A lot of times we look at the person, but we don't realize what it's doing to the Spirit that lives within them. If they grieve the Spirit enough, the Bible tells us not to grieve the Spirit. When you keep saying something that goes against the Word, the Spirit after a while will not dwell, because the one thing that the Spirit can't do is He can't override you. And because He can't override you, He will not stay where there's a lack of faith to do what the Word of God is telling us to do. And we're going to talk about that more this week, hopefully. But so, when we start talking about, breaking the purpose of the enemy and breaking the will of the works of the devil, these are some of those works that we got to be very careful. When I talk about sin, knowing to do good and doing it not, you should always want to do good to your fellow brothers. You should always want to help them to get better. You should always want to help them to grow and mature. And if we don't, and all we're trying to do, because I'll watch you all, and I'll watch you with your children, and you'll fight tooth and nail for your children. But what about the children of God? I don't think sometimes that we understand the eternal family that we're a part of. We have a family here that's our natural family. And when we get born again, we come into the family of God, the eternal family, I call it. It's the family that we're going to be with for eternity. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, we're always fighting and dealing with the fleshly and the natural while we neglect the eternal. Maybe one day this week I'll show you some scriptures, in line with that. And that's why one thing we've got to be careful with is with that. So, today I just pray that as you go forth today, and you get around your brother or your sister, and you hear them saying things, correct them in a loving way. But remind them that they are a son or a daughter of the Most High God, and His Spirit lives within them. Remind them of what they are. They are a carrier of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. They carry that Spirit. And we got to learn how to honor that Spirit, even in times when we feel dishonored within ourselves. All right? Well, I love you. You take care today. Have a wonderful day. God bless you. And just let us know if you watched it, and and just send me like a little initial whatever on your name, just so we kind of see. Okay, we love you. God bless you. Bye bye.